This is a very special chat you're having on ET Now regarding the digitization of income tax in India. Income tax reforms we've been seeing, GST and others, has actually led to a major improvement in collections, the way countries actually reporting. Look at, it's been 6 years of GST and look at how the collections are going up. Not only GST, the corporate tax, even personal income tax is showing much strong improvement, and a very large role has been played by the way digitization or technology adoption has happened in that space. So this is an interaction regarding that, and I have with me a partner at Deloitte, Rohinton Sidhwa, who is joining us, along with an industry perspective. We've got Indra Anand, who is joining us from Tata Sons. Gentlemen and the lady, thank you very much for joining us. So Deloitte has conducted this very exhaustive survey, Rohinton, regarding how digitization actually happening in taxes in India and the progress so far. Before we come to the ingredients of that survey, talk to us about how did you go about conducting this and what are the scope and size of this survey?
So actually it kind of covers almost all of corporate India, so it basically covers corporates. We have different buckets going from companies under 500 crore to companies beyond 3,000 crore. So it's like a full gamut of corporate India and who's paying corporate income taxes. The survey actually takes care of a number of new areas because the government has been digitizing in such a serious way around compliance, around tax reporting, that there's never been any kind of feedback mechanism that's actually come out, and that's what our survey has actually tried to put out.
So talk to us about how many companies did you speak to, what kind of people there, and also what are the sectors which got represented in this survey?
So it's across all sectors. We had about 200 plus companies who participated in the survey, and typically these were people who are either tax heads or CFOs of the company who reported in with their findings to us.
Okay, let's go about what are the kind of questions you posed and what were you trying to map via this survey when you're talking to your corporate clientele?
So we actually put the survey into 3 or 4 buckets. The first bucket was feedback about what the government is currently doing, what the feedback from taxpayers as to how they are negotiating the digitization that's been thrust on them by the government. The second part of the survey talks about their pain points and which areas they think they can improve on. The third bucket basically talks about how digitization has impacted them, and the last part is more futuristic about what's going to happen in the future given what's already happened now.
Indra, from the corporate's point of view, I mean, you of course, House of Tatas represents the larger corporate group in India. Before I come to the details, I would like your understanding. You've been a professional in this area for a very long time, close to over 2 decades, if I may assume that. What have you observed the reform of taxation over the years and the role technology is playing in government thrust on digitization? How much ground have we covered in your view?
So as I guess you rightly mentioned, it's nearly over 2 decades of experience, and I can tell you there's been a massive shift from what tax was earlier, the way it was administered earlier and the way it is today. The government has rightly and very aptly leveraged technology to suit this right object. Technology has touched all aspects of our life, and this therefore cannot be out of it. What we earlier saw as volumes of paper, we are today moving towards something which is paperless. And the systems now talking to each other at their end, we propose to see this moving forward at our end as well. So there's been a paradigm shift in the entire approach with which tax was earlier considered to be. You would disclose, they would come after you, there would be audits. It's now pre-filled forms. They already have the data. So I think it's a most welcome step of using technology in tax.
Rohinton, how do you assess the progress so far when you speak with your clients of such varied kind of backdrops, sectors and sizes? What is the prognosis so far? Are companies adopting technology and are working in this digitized world of taxation now versus earlier?
So one of the key findings that our survey came out is that the government has progressed much faster than taxpayers in this particular area. So they have very quickly adopted digitalization into their DNA, and almost every sort of filing is now completely digitized. I think what is now left to do perhaps is the next stage of digitization, and maybe I'll come back to that later. What our clients are finding is that the government has actually moved too fast, and they are getting left behind. Their legacy systems are not ready, and they are taking time to kind of churn out the data that's actually required by the government now.
So when you say tax administration has actually taken the lead in implementation of technology, how can the government and the entire ecosystem, I would say, inclusive of government and clients, taxpayers, come together in a way that the taxpayers are not left behind? In fact, they don't find it, a lot of troubles to actually go about administration, compliance and all of that. They should work, or they are moving in tandem with the speed of the government, I would say.
So actually, the government has also learned as they've implemented, right? So they made mistakes. They recognize they made some mistakes as they gone along. But each year, filing procedure has actually improved. There was a point of time where the forms were not accurate. You had 3-4 versions of the XML that had to be updated before it could be uploaded. And now things have largely settled down. We have very tight systems that are running. The forms are now looking at the income tax return forms are looking at being consolidated for individual taxpayers. For corporate returns, the procedure is still complex, but there is an element of stability that has now come into the reporting side of things. I think the next set of progress will really be made in terms of analytics and AI, and how the government actually uses some of the data that they have collected all these years.
That's a very important point you made. I would like some more light on that. If you could add some color, and what kind of analytical use of AI, all of that, because the first leg, or I would say the platform of transformation, have been made by technology, government and taxpayers. What level do we move next, and what will we achieve with that?
So there are 2-3 areas which the government can hopefully achieve things. So they are already cognizant of one area, which is increasing the tax base, finding out whether taxpayers are reporting the correct income, and whether all taxpayers are actually filing their tax return. So I think they've spent quite a lot of time on that phase. They've called it Project Insight, where they've tried to kind of do some analytics on data that is available to them. Remember, they're collecting data from multiple sources. They're collecting information about the car that you bought. They're collecting information from the stock market of the shares you bought. So they're getting information from multiple sources. What they're doing that is to assemble a profile of a taxpayer, and then using that to ensure that the taxpayer reports the full income or actually files a tax return.
So that point, Indra, what Rohinton was talking about, that of course the focus and the priority of the government is to increase the collections. Now it can either be done by increasing the tax base, going after people who are not reporting better compliance on taxes, and the other is by increasing the taxes. On the compliance part, as a representation of the industry as well as a large corporate house, how can compliance be made? That objective should be to get more companies under the net, but in this process we should not land up making it very cumbersome with the companies which are already being very compliant, so that needless processes can be eliminated. Any perspective on that?
On the compliance, the big large corporates spend, I think, more than 50% of their time complying, and that's largely due to the large data they handle. So something at a leg where we can foresee what is coming. So with expanding scope, as we see of our regulators thinking, that this is going to be the end of the TDS, we have one added every year. So some kind of a stop there, or understanding where we are exactly landing. You have systems, the large corporates must have spent enough on technology and thinking that this is done, but there is again a scope for some more revision to incorporate some more elements. So some element of consistency, or kind of surety that this will not put them out. I don't see anywhere that we've dropped out anything. So government is quite home on that. That's,
so
I think.
Does it also lead to a lot of additional costs, time, burden, manpower to all of that?
Precisely, it does. Today we are coping with all of that, and it's increasing by the day as we talk.
So it also impacts shareholder returns to a large extent, right?
Yes.
So Rohinton, let's talk about some of the areas of future. How can technology of the future can be adopted to make lives easier and plus achieve better compliance, more collections? Is there scope for that?
Oh, you're absolutely correct, because the part about compliance, it's not as difficult a problem to crack as it's sometimes made out to be. Typically, we've always had large ERPs operating within corporates for the financial data. Usually, these large ERPs are capable of finalizing financial results within maybe 5 days of ending of the quarter. Why can't the same rigor not come to tax computerization? And unfortunately, what's happened is a lot of that area of digitalization has lagged behind at taxpayers' end. So with the government showing the lead that this is the path that they are going to go down in the future, the opportunity is now open for taxpayers, especially to look at invest in more robust systems to be able to at a press of a button generate the tax return that they need to file for the end of the year. So I think that's the area that you would want to kind of see going into the future. Also, our survey said something very interesting, that one size does not fit all.
Yes.
So the smaller taxpayers tend to be still very manual driven, whereas larger taxpayers have already invested significantly in technology, but they still also have some path to cover.
As Indra was just saying, I mean, the amount of effort, technology, all of that, large corporates are doing their bit. Maybe that adoption at the mid to SME or mid-size corporates.
And that's where actually the burden hurts the most, because at the smaller and the mid-size companies, the amount of time actually spent on doing TDS and the admin burden of actually doing the compliance can be simply excessive.
What about SAFT? How can that help?
So this is a thing, as the government kind of proceeds into the future, the first part of their exercise was digitizing the compliance. The next part is the faceless actual assessment. Today, assessment, when it's done for corporates, it's actually still done by, it's faceless, but it's actually another human being at the other end who's actually doing the assessment. With SAFT, the roadmap is that every corporate will upload a defined data set to the tax department, and actually a computer will perhaps do the audit of that return. And just imagine the subjectivity that goes away when something like that happens.
How can that help in your view?
That really will be a certain good help, and I think that can be taken to the next level by seeing whatever is litigation hidden in these elements on assessment, and that can also be taken care of with the technology. So that will ease out the burden at our appellate level, which is largely stuck. Once it's assessed, similar experience should also be carried over to the litigation front.
Because you were making a point that for corporates, the next level, the issue gets stuck at the litigation. Sometimes it takes years and years, and the amount which is actually...
And it becomes a recurring feature, because not just that for 1 year, those issues are picked up year on year, till you see the fate of it, it's 15, 20 years down the lane.
Yes.
So it becomes quite a cost which business is running for this.
Let's talk about some of the other important... You said that authorities really need to help the taxpayer side, because in their backdrop, all the agencies are talking to each other. That's how they have pre-filled forms. That's how they have a lot clearer data points regarding the clients. But when it comes to talking to the client system, that interface is not happening.
At this point, it's not there. But possibly there are countries where this has actually happened. For instance, in certain countries around the world, the financial systems of the taxpayer are directly linked to that of the tax assessor. So it's automatically real-time data that's flowing. It's actually happening for GST. As you know, month on month, the data is almost on a real-time basis. You're able to look at it. And perhaps that path can happen for direct taxes as well. But what's important is that, in order to be consistent, for digitizing data, you have to have one single cohesive data pool. And if you're filing returns with multiple agencies from that same source data, ideally, the agencies should be kind of synced up with regard to that single source of data. So there's a single source of truth, as they say.
Okay, so let's talk about the suggestions, some key action areas, and maybe we can talk about the best thing which have happened so far. How have the demonstration of technology in the tax department or in the entire tax ecosystem has been very good? One suggestion and something which you admire most.
So I'll give something which is good, which has happened for individuals.
Sure, yeah.
See how quickly you get your refunds now, right? So that's a perfect example of how technology has positively impacted all of us. But then that unfortunately has not carried over on the corporate tax side, where refunds still are kind of mired in a different process, and there the government really needs to kind of work and try and improve things over there. So that's one area which actually a lot of our survey respondents have come back saying that we have still a lot of refunds stuck with the tax department.
That's a very big challenge right now. Any suggestion on the challenges which we need to overcome in this direction?
In this direction, as I said, largely the refunds get stuck to what I feel is the litigation, because of the fact that the assessment will itself result into a demand that's still not shared with the assessee, because it's a two-way system, and the litigation which is stuck for years. So till such resolution is translated into the numbers, it will not happen. I think therefore the point is there.
So I'm very curious to understand how the feedback mechanism happening with Ministry of Corporate Affairs, all the departments in fact who deal with these matters. They are listening, they are taking suggestions, they are working closely, because even ground so far would not have been covered if they were not working very closely with the assessees. What are your thoughts there? Any thoughts there?
So we did send a copy of our survey to them along with our findings.
Nice.
So hopefully they are taking cognizance of some of the matters that we've highlighted.
How's your experience been?
The Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the tax administration, they have heard us out, but we are yet to see whether they're talking to each other about our problems.
Sure.
So that is yet to be, we await to see that.
All right, gentlemen, Rohinton and Indra, thank you so much for chatting with us today. We have actually covered a lot of ground in terms of the kind of administration, the reforms in taxation which you have seen, especially in light of adoption of technology. But I think, as you just said, that we still have a lot of ground to cover compared to where globally things stand right now, and it's always an ongoing process. So thank you very much for your sharing the findings of your survey, and Indra for your perspective from large corporates
Thank you so
standpoint.
much.
Thank you. Guys, with that, it's back to you in the studios.